Park Improvement Project. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Reno is going to make a presentation. Most of you know Matt. He's been with us a number of years, and he's currently managing capital projects in the Community Services Department. And so he's got a presentation that tries to put some context around the issues that we are confronting in the capital improvement program for Allen Pond Park, and to a large degree some of the many of the issues that Matt will highlight also will reside and do reside at Whitemarsh Park as we engage in further planning and implementation of the capital program. So let me ask Matt to proceed, and Council, you can either jump in at your leisure with questions or hold them to the end, whatever works for Council. We'll be glad to facilitate.
To go.
Great.
Good to see you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Forgive me for sitting here. We've got some technical difficulties, so if you don't mind, I'll present from a seated position. Yeah. So tonight we're going to go over a couple things. I'm going to present to you a presentation on parks and public spaces. We're going to go ahead and have a discussion about the status of the park master plan and some action items. And then I'd be happy to discuss any questions you may have. So we'll go ahead and get started. And of course, all the activities are there, so Don't worry about focusing on me. Please focus up there while I wow you. So positioning Bowie parks and public spaces to thrive. That's what we're here to discuss tonight. We're here to specifically discuss placemaking. Placemaking strengthens the connection between people and the places they share. So what is placemaking? Placemaking is a multifaceted approach to the planning, design, and management of public spaces. Placemaking capitalizes on a local community's assets, inspiration, and potential with the intention of creating public spaces that promote people's health, happiness, and well-being. So what do people want in a place they live? The above photos are examples of some placemaking, which makes people feel connected, healthy, and alive, and part of something that's fabulous and unique in their community. Residents want to live and visit destinations where they can walk, dine, shop, and recreate, all in a central location. Vibrant, thriving communities are those that embrace a sense of cohesion and place, with a wide variety of activities and amenities. There are three pillars identified by the National Recreation and Parks Association that impact communities' health and wellness, conservation, and social equity. The first pillar is health and wellness. Public park and recreation agencies create healthy communities and play a fundamental role in enhancing the physical environments in which we live. Through facilities, outdoor settings, and services provided, they support good health for people of all abilities, ages, socioeconomic backgrounds, and ethnicities. As many of you are aware, currently there are more than 1/3 of U.S. adults are obese, and as of 2012, more than 1/3 of children and adolescents were overweight or obese. The second pillar is conservation. Parks and public lands serve an essential role in preserving the natural resources and wildlife habitat, protecting clean water and clean air, and provide open space for current and future generations. Parks provide an essential connection for Americans of all ages and abilities to the life-enhancing benefits of nature and the outdoors. As the largest source of public open space in the country, parks and public lands are critical to the quality of life for all Americans. The quality of life for every person is improved by clean, green, and accessible parks and open space. For example, in addition to their function, stormwater management elements can be incorporated into active public spaces by providing unique opportunities for environmental education, as well as offer landscape appeal. Pillar 3 speaks to social equity. True to the very philosophy of public parks and recreation is the idea that all people, no matter their age, income level, or ability, has access to programs, facilities, places, and spaces that make their lives and communities great. It is a right, not just a privilege, for people nationwide to have safe, healthful access to park and recreation. Because of this, people connect with one another and build bonds that last a lifetime. Places transform into destinations with influx of new business and local economies flourish. Parks and recreation truly build communities, communities for all. It should be Bowie's goal to view all park and community improvements as areas to be designed to ensure social equity by incorporating elements that all can use or play. For example, providing outdoor exercise equipment adjacent to playgrounds and ball fields, or by providing unique seating elements so seniors are able to sit comfortably and enjoy the areas where their grandchildren may play. Although not a pillar, we cannot discredit the economic development component. We cannot ignore the economic impacts of park and recreation facilities. Parks provide intrinsic environmental and aesthetic and recreational benefits to our cities, as well as positive economic benefits. They enhance property values, increase municipal revenue, bring in home buyers, provide jobs, and attract retirees. It may very well be in Bowie's best interest to begin to look at our park and recreation offerings as economic driver to our community. Just as public safety and public services, just as public safety and utilities are considered as essential public services, park and recreation facilities are equally important to establish and maintain a high quality of life in Bowie. We need to acknowledge that residents and non-residents who use city parks and facilities also support the businesses in our community that make Bowie an attractive place to live and play. For example, Elizabethtown, Kentucky, centrally located within 44 miles of Louisville, Kentucky. Elizabethtown is located at the intersection of 3 major highways, very similar to Bowie. It encompasses 25 square miles with a population of approximately 29,000. This particular project was built to host local and regional sports events. The project details, it's 144 acres, it has 12 baseball fields, 10 multi-sports fields, 1 ADA-compliant field complex, 3 pavilions, 4 comfort stations, a 5K walking and jogging trail, and 4 playgrounds. The cost was $29 million. However, Elizabethtown in the first year estimated the economic impact of $10 million in the first year alone. Why should Bowie parks and public spaces be unique and captivating? What attracts people most, it would appear, is other people. So what we have and what we should have. What we have, we've got well-manicured traditional parks with typical amenities, but not many distinguishing features or elements that create placemaking experiences. What we should have is parks and public spaces that define Bowie and which are a catalyst for engaging the community by creating an inspiring and memorable experience each and every time that place is visited. So what makes a place great? Great public spaces are where celebrations are held, social and economic exchanges take place, friends meet, cultures mix. They are the front porches of our public institutions where we interact with each other in government. When places work well, they serve as a stage for our public lives. So how do we get people to want to be there? By creating comfortable and unique spaces that encourage people to interact with one another. The city should look at each public improvement as a way of creating a new and unique space or element that will make people want to regularly return to the space. These spaces need to be welcoming, active and fun, and provide comfortable elements that hold people in the space longer and unite and connect individuals. Oops. I knew there'd be an oops during this presentation. Pardon me for 1 second while I go back. We'll get you there. These spaces need to be welcoming, active, and fun, and provide comfortable elements that hold people in the space longer and unite and connect individuals of all ages, abilities, and socioeconomic backgrounds. Making these places and spaces safe to access, whether on foot or by... I apologize. This was the technology difficulty I'm struggling with here. There we go. Making these spaces and places easy and safe to access, whether on foot or cycle, is an important aspect to connecting surrounding communities. Those who use these spaces inevitably will become your supporters. By creating architecturally pleasing, innovative, and environmentally sustainable facilities to inspire and define the space. Our goal should be to attract visitors to these locations during all seasons, regardless of their need to be there for programmed activities like football, lacrosse, baseball, or soccer. By designing architecturally appealing facilities, as well as creatively designing the landscape and its features, we create a place where people want to spend time with family, neighbors, and friends. This also provides Bowie with a sense of branding that helps make Bowie a desired location in which to live, work, and play. By utilizing various types of equipment and amenities within our parks and public spaces that encourage family participation. The goal with playgrounds should be to provide elements that not only generate physical activity through climbing, swinging, sliding, but also enhances a child's experience through creative thought. For example, an alternative to traditional post and deck playgrounds would be the use of glass fiber reinforced concrete. With these types of structures, a playground can create a whole new experience for a child, one that can allow a child's mind to tell a story during play. By providing these unique and innovative play equipment and elements, it generates creative, free-thought play for all family members. The experience is more likely to instigate return visits. This particular slide that you're seeing there now is actually a park that recently opened by Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission here in Prince George's County. It's Walker Mill Park. It's a fantastic playground. It's only about 4 miles from here if you'd like to take a field trip. By providing a multitude of elements within a space that offer varying opportunities to both participants and spectators. Our goal should be to attract visitors to these locations all the time, regardless of their need to be there for programmed activities, such as football, lacrosse, baseball, or soccer. Combining art with creative landscape design. Combining art, unique recreation equipment, and creative landscape design in city parks and open spaces creates a memorable place for events and activities, which we now understand as placemaking. Spaces like these could further help define Bowie, Maryland. So the information that I attempted to provide in this presentation is really just meant to encourage dialogue between council and staff, so that a basis of design can be established as a guide when working with architects and to design our park master plan elements. This approach would ensure a consistent implementation of our park development elements. So why? So we're at a point where decisions soon need to be made regarding the type, style, and design of various elements in our parks. In particular, our amphitheater, our restroom concession facilities, and our pedestrian plazas, as defined in our Allen Pond and Whitemarsh master plans. We've recently hired architects that are going to be working with us on looking at developing these areas, and we need to give them some of our basis for what we want them to design. Each of these master plans has items identified in the fiscal year 16 budget for design, with construction taking place in FY17. So the following slides detail specific elements in both of the Allen Pond Park and the Whitemarsh Park master plans. I don't know if you've had a chance to refresh yourselves on those master plans. They're quite extensive and they can be somewhat boring and daunting, but they are very important to sort of creating these spaces in our parks and making sure that Bowie parks can continue to thrive. So now we'll move on quickly now to the second part of the presentation. There's no more fancy, well, there's a few more fancy photos, but so where we are with Allen Pond Park Master Plan. In FY16, we're going to be working with an architect to design Parking Lot F. Parking Lot F is the large parking lot in Allen Pond Park on the right-hand side when you come in the main entrance. It's adjacent to the overflow lot. So what we want to probably do there is we would like to look at some unique stormwater management options. I say look at them. I think we're going to be required to implement them, knowing what the guidelines are. But if you look at these in particular, it actually makes a parking lot look attractive when you have that. Another fancy thing, this was a municipality that had an overflow lot, and they didn't want this overflow lot to look like an asphalt parking lot. So they just painted it. So when their cars aren't on it, it's just kind of an interesting artistic attribute. So we're also looking at the design of the new restrooms that'll go in Allen Pond. Here's a fairly simple restroom facility, but you'll notice it does have some artistic flair to it. You know, it makes it kind of stand out, gives it a little pop and sizzle. Then, of course, you can get to this one here. This is a restroom and concession facility in California that was recently built. Uses a lot of natural light, very environmentally sensitive and sustainable structure. Then, of course, as you know, we're going to be looking at the design of a new amphitheater and, of course, the site that goes with it. And that's one component that I think we need to focus on is, you know, you're not only building a restroom and building an amphitheater, but you're figuring out the space around it. And how do you make that space work for the activities that we plan to program there? This is an amphitheater very similar in size to the square footage of ours. This one's in Wisconsin, in Wausau City Square. Another option would be this one. This is one that's in Riverdale, Georgia. And then, of course, you have this one in Waterloo, Iowa. Waterloo, Iowa is very similar to Bowie in a sense, slightly larger population, 68,000, but waterfront type of situation, very similar to Allen Pond. You know, we really do like the look of these tension structures, and it's something that's become very modern now and very cost effective in municipalities. Then, of course, what I spoke to was the site. You look at both of these. Picture on the left there, you'll notice that there's just a lot of elements that are brought into this space. Boulders, concrete retaining walls, grass open space, gardens, shade trees. All of those are elements and components that make that space comfortable and that people want to spend time there, regardless of the need to be in the park for any other type of athletic activity. People just want to show up and hang out. You know, and maybe they want to be on their tablets or their phones, and they might have their neighbors just go down and meet for a cup of coffee. It's an inviting space. On the right-hand side, slightly more extravagant. That's a city park in downtown Charlotte. Actually, I walked through that park last year while attending the National Recreation and Parks Congress, and that park is absolutely fabulous. It's probably more than what we need, but what I want to draw your attention to again is sort of the artistic elements. We could do them on a smaller scale, but it makes that place really unique and exciting. Here's some interesting seating options. You know, these are just options I've bootlegged off the internet, but you know, if you had an opportunity to sit on this hard metal bench in a park, would you want to sit on that, or would you want to sit in that wood one? I'd want to sit in the one on the right, the wood one. On the left-hand side, I don't think I could pass those up in a park wanting to sit on one of those things on the left, but they're also planters. So in FY17 at Allen Pond, the master plan, we basically are looking at the construction of the restrooms and the construction of the amphitheater. You know, the cost numbers you see there are really, they're estimated costs, and again, depending upon the level of design that we want to put into those spaces, those costs, you know, could go up. And then when you start really talking about the site and making sure you get the site for the amphitheater and the restrooms and the public plaza to blend well, it's going to take some dollars to be able to get that to be a functional space that works for what the city's needs and desires are. So on to Whitemarsh Park. Well, actually, we'll go back. So Allen Pond Park, we're talking about a basis of design elements for park improvements. So staff was looking for some concurrence from council with the following design elements. Obviously, the new amphitheater in the general location that the master plan has it. We're also talking about inclusion of tiered seating concepts as appropriate. We'd like to look at the creation of a pedestrian plaza adjacent to the amphitheater and the restrooms, incorporating appropriate shade elements. I think no one would disagree that when we have our events at Allen Pond, you find a lot of the people underneath the trees and at the back of the hillside because they're trying to find shade. If we're going to develop these areas in the amphitheater, we should look to make sure we're providing that shade so those residents and those visitors are right front and center of our amphitheater. We're also talking about construction of sufficiently sized restrooms and for park patrons and events. Consideration for creative stormwater management features that we had talked about, much of those of which probably will be required. And then consideration of a water feature within the park. Now we'll jump over to Whitemarsh. So in Whitemarsh, what we're looking at, in 2015, we had funding to come up with some conceptual designs for the restroom concession facility, and we'll be able to show you the final conceptual design. But in 2016, the current year budget, we're looking at design of parking lots A, B, and E. They probably don't mean a whole lot to you, but A, B, and E are generally, if you're in Whitemarsh Park, all of the major gravel parking lots, those will consist of B and E. A would be a whole new parking lot to the far west of the park that would be constructed. And again, these are the same photos, but we would look to hopefully utilize some creative stormwater management techniques there, most of which will be required, but if nothing else, they also provide, you know, some aesthetic appeal. Then we're looking at the design of the new the pedestrian plaza. And that would also allow for the placement of the restroom concession facility in a play area. The white box is essentially the pedestrian plaza we're talking about. That's where the restrooms will be, and that's where the play area and the concession facility. What we're looking at there, the photo on your left, you know, there's an athletic field, a parking lot, and there's a plaza. It's small, but it's functional, has your restroom concession facility, and if you notice, there's shade trees, there's benches, there's multiple areas for people to gather and sit. So if their kids happen to be playing sports and they're there for a couple hours, they got a comfortable place where mom and dad or big sis can go down there and hang out with their friends while their son or their daughters or their brothers or sisters are playing in the fields. On the right-hand side, it's just an artistic element of a bench. You know, if you incorporate some uniqueness in the seating areas within these public spaces, I think you're going to find that you're going to hold people longer and they're going to create that placemaking experience. That's the conceptual design that was sort of developed initially for the restroom concession facility at Whitemarsh. And then here's an example of sort of a non-traditional style playground. It's not post and deck, it's not glass fiber reinforced concrete, but it's a whole new sort of innovative and modern design and playground structures. And you can see from this one, this keeps kids climbing for hours. There's, you know, they can get lost in that thing for hours. I could get lost in that thing for hours. 2017, construction of the pedestrian plaza to include the restroom concession facility in the new play area. So those were just some of the photos that we would hope to include when we get to this design of this particular pedestrian plaza and the restroom concession area. So again, we're looking at the basis of design elements for these park improvements at Whitemarsh. We're looking again for concurrence for the utilization of creative stormwater management features in the parking areas, utilization of creative seating and shade elements. Again, we're talking about shade and seating. We're looking at the inclusion of a 2 to 12 age themed play area in the pedestrian plaza. We're looking at incorporation of attractive architectural features in the facade of the planned restroom concession facility. You know, a lot of times does it cost a little bit more to do that? It does, but does it bring a sense of personalization to that space? It does. Incorporation of sufficient space for public art within the pedestrian plaza. So those are just, again, some of the basis of design elements that we were looking for. So that's it. So I want to thank you for your time this evening, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on these master plans or the presentation. Thank you.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Matt, for the presentation. I think it's thought-provoking and asks you to look at parks in a kind of a slightly different way than we've typically done that. You've included a significant menu of options and choices, really, already in the capital improvement program. You have a history of that. You continue that in the budget review this past April, and we provided you copies just to tie it into Matt's presentation, which referenced them. Some of these are big ticket items. There's no question about it. You know, we've been struggling with the amphitheater, for example, for years. Matt referenced some of these fabric structures. Those of you who've gone to the Eastern Shore see the Sail Winds Park at Cambridge when you come across the Frederick Malchus Bridge there over the Chop Tank. That's been there probably 15 years, 10 years. It's a pretty decent looking structure and has held up well. So it doesn't, I don't think you necessarily need to replicate what we have now, but you want to continue with that kind of amenity to provide a focus for community events and performances. Matt covered a lot of territory tonight. Just to quickly recap, you awarded a contract for design work at Whitemarsh a month or so ago, and we're going to be coming to you with a recommendation shortly for Allen Pond Park for design work. So what I think works best tonight is to hear your reactions. Was there anything that you think really struck you as something that we really ought to focus on? Did you see anything different or anything new that you can say to us, yeah, that one slide or that one comment that Matt focused on is something that we ought to include as we proceed down the design path? That's one question. The other, of course, is, since we're at the early stages, is we all have to keep in mind the cost. You know, we have some numbers that basically came out of the master plans that were presented to you in 2010 that developed the budget materials that came to you last spring. So the other point, too, is now that it's 9:30 at night, after having heard all of this, you know, where do we go from here? We want to get your feedback. And, you know, what we're trying to do is to set the framework, set the stage for that. If you can give us some of that tonight, great. If you say, well, you've given us an awful lot to think about, an awful lot to go home and talk about, maybe what we need to do is to schedule another meeting fairly soon, a month or so, after you've absorbed some of this. You know, we get into these CIP cycles, and they tend to come up very quickly, and sometimes we have to roll projects over, as we talked about with the supplemental. So the best thing that could happen for staff tonight is to get any comments that you have in any of this material. I think that the positive thing is, you can create great space by replicating what we have, but you have an opportunity to use some different concepts. Matt mentioned a park in downtown Charlotte. I had seen it a couple years earlier. It's only a 5.5 acre downtown park, but they've incorporated within that downtown park attributes to attract different age groups. They've got a concert area, they've got a children's play area, concession stand, and it's called Romare Burden Park, named after a prominent African-American artist from Charlotte. So you've got to tie into the local culture, which is really interesting. So, this is not a budget session where, we don't need an authorization tonight for any of these decisions, but we need you to give us some guidance. If we can get it tonight, great. If you say, well, you really ought to come back, and after we think about it, we'll provide you some additional questions to help narrow the conversation, that works too. So let me stop there and see if that helps a little bit.
All right, before going to questions, let's see about this notice. This is considered a public hearing. Does anybody sign up to speak?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, Mrs. Plank and then Mr. Marcos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two questions. Mark, I guess you can answer these, or anybody can, really. You mentioned having public art within the plaza, but when I saw these fancy schmancy seatings and play areas for the kids, that in itself is public art. So you might have sensory overload if you start putting other pieces in there, because I was getting a little overloaded with all that. And the thing that really, when Mr. Deutsch, when you said something that really jumped out at you to mention, the tiered seating at the amphitheater, would that restrict the use of that piece of property? If you have the amphitheater and tiered seating, would you only then be able to use that piece of property if you're using the theater? Because it won't be a piece of grass where kids can run and roll down the hill and the dogs can chase them, and it'll be totally different if it's tiered seating, at least what I'm envisioning.
Sure, and you're right. The specific design of that space, that's the sort of the input we need. So when we start to work with these architects, we can say, listen, we'd like to try to incorporate a component of tiered seating which will really allow us to achieve full ADA compliance and capacity there. So we can now, incorporate individuals with disabilities right in front center. But I hear what you're saying. You do like that space where kids can kind of play left and right. I don't think we necessarily like kids playing football in front of a band that's performing, but designing that space appropriately would allow for those activities left and right for those individuals who truly want to see the presentation or hear the music. They can sit front and center, whether it's on some form of tiered seating or it's on grass that's fairly level. I know I particularly struggle when I happen to go to a grass area and it's sloped, and you try to sit there, you kind of feel like you're eventually going to end up at the bottom. So providing some level of tiered seating, I think, certainly has a usefulness, not only from an ADA standpoint, but from a comfort level. But yes, I think you're correct in that we need to look at that area. And hearing your comments is something that we can take back to an architect, the landscape architect, and say, hey, here's what we're looking at in front of that area. Mainly it's the concept of, do you like sort of the concept of having some tiered seating, which the master plan called for, it just wasn't specific. Now when you get to design, you really got to kind of figure out how much tiered seating do you want. Sure. You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to thank staff. I think you guys are definitely on the right track here. There were some good designs up there. If I could put my 2 cents in, what I would probably recommend is, out of most of our parks that we have and everything, Allen Pond seems to be the shining star. I like the idea of really concentrating on that amphitheater, especially the one design along the waterfront. That was very impressive. I think that something like that down there would really draw and kind of be the centerpiece for that park. So, and then again, of course, like Diane said, or my colleague, you could kind of incorporate or mix the different pervious surfaces to, you know, concrete or whatever, grass areas, rocks and stuff. That would really make it attractive. So, good job.
Great, thank
Proud
you.
of you guys.
Mr. Wolfley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of quick comments. The first is, as always, I find these things frightfully expensive, but I do think there's tremendous opportunity here, and I think to the extent that we can make use of existing examples that can be replicated here, things that we can kind of have a tangible example incorporate. I think that's helpful both in terms of understanding what it might look like, but also in perhaps saving on some initial design and engineering work and have a better understanding at least what the real costs are going to look like. One of the other things I want to make sure you guys take into consideration is the useful life issue and the maintenance associated with some of these options. It's clear to me that we can have some really whiz-bang things, but if they look like they dilapidate after 5 years, I hate to be in a persistent recycle pattern of repeating, replacing, and that sort of thing. So I want to make sure folks put some attention on that. Always interested in landscape architecture as a solution for both obviously surrounding the entertainment area, but as in its own right throughout the area. Also, if you would be sure, and I'm not sure how much you've had an opportunity to do yet, stakeholder groups interested in making sure that we have stakeholder groups that might be able to add some value incorporated into the process as well. It's a nice presentation. I think people come to Bowie to visit. A lot of folks come and they see our parks, and that's an exceptional foot forward that we place, and I think we need to continue by upgrading and maintaining the facilities. And that includes both Allen Pond and Whitemarsh as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Brady?
Thank you. I'll only start off by commending staff on the presentation. It's very thought-provoking and rather interesting, different, and unique. And what I would suggest would be that instead of looking to replicate what others do here in Bowie, use that as an inspiration to put our mark on what we do, and I think we ought to move forward in that sense. Following on Councilman Wolfley's comment, I agree with the stakeholders. I think we ought to reach out, look at the Recreation Committee, look at the Arts Committee, look at the Environmental Committee, talk to the seniors, go over to the Senior Center, bring them in to get their thoughts and their ideas. You know, when you talk about a park and you see images in like Chicago and New York and what have you, you usually see the tables set up for chess, where you have the big chess pieces and an area set out. So be creative and be different in trying to get a lot of things that are different and unique, but not too many things that it becomes a burden, whether it's visual or otherwise. With regards to the tiered seating, I would agree with the need for that, because when you do go there, it's a challenge at times. But when you're talking about the children's ability to tumble and roll and what have you, the simple solution there is to keep the area, the front half level in front of it, and then you tier the hill that's further away, so people further away can see over those that are in front of them. So it's a trade-off on the two, so I think that's what you ought to look at doing. And I think you ought to be creative in the kind of amenities you bring in, what they look like, get away from the standard cookie cutter type latrine, if you will, from the old military days and what have you. Right. Make it look that it fits in, and kind of through a creative design obscures what it really is, if you will, if you understand that. So I think that is the objective here. I think we're heading in the right direction. It's very promising. and I look forward to the final product in both these cases. I do have one plug, though, and this is the bigger picture, if you will. While working at NIST, there is a subdivision close by. It's right on the north side of Muddy Branch, right off of Great Seneca Highway. But what I found unique in this, and it's a recreational amenity, and it's kind of carved out in a bowl. If you really look at it, around the perimeter of the field is a swale. And what that facility really is a stormwater management pond. Mm-hmm. It's a dry pond, only used whenever there's heavy rains. Right. But it's also a recreational amenity. And I think maybe that's, we're talking about cost for facilities, maybe if we double up, and the one that comes to mind is Enfield Chase, where you've got a fairly large stormwater management, and then you've got another field adjacent to it that you could end up having possibly a bigger field if you were creative in how you designed it. So just keep that in mind in the future, that you may be able to have a recreational amenity co-located with a stormwater management facility that isn't an active facility, but rather one of those that occurs whenever you have the 50 or 100-year floods or what have you. So thank you.
Mr. Garner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, staff, for putting together this great presentation this evening. I definitely have to agree with my colleagues tonight that it was truly thought-provoking, and I like everything that was presented this evening, everything. My only concern is that I like to see it more or less spread across the city. In talking with city staff in the past about Allen Pond, it is the hub of the city as far as our parks, but we do have others in the city that typically do not come into Allen Pond. So, we have parks such as Jericho, and we have South Bowie. We have different parks around the community or in the city here. And I like to see this same sort of activity or pattern in art and incorporated through and woven throughout the entire city, so that those residents that are on the far south part of the city or Old Bowie can also enjoy those sort of conveniences. So I'm with Councilmember Brady when he said to incorporate and talk to the stakeholders such as the recreational committees and the environmental committee and the art committees, getting those committees and their buy-in, that is very important. I like what you're doing. You're definitely on the right track. And yes, some of our colleagues tonight said that Bowie is home to some of the most beautiful parks in the region, and I just like to see us continue and not just put so much burden on Allen Pond, but also going out throughout the city, different areas of the city, and having parks and making it available to residents outside of just District 3. Okay, but thank you very much for your presentation. Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trout.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, staff, for an enlightening presentation. It really got me thinking in a whole different level with regard to parks. See, because normally, when we're dealing with structures like this, buildings, the first thing that comes into my mind is, okay, are we LEED certified, and then LEED certification? And I was thinking along the lines when I was looking at your presentation, I'm saying, well, is there such a thing as LEED certification for parks? Because some of the elements that you were discussing would lend one to believe, and you're talking about the lighting, that's a LEED, classification, and a whole lot of other different things that you were talking about, especially the stormwater management aspect of it. And I'm wondering, is there such a thing as a parks LEED certification? And if there is, can this be used to lower the cost, or get, grants or different other attributes from various other entities above us that do appreciate when you come up with a LEED, okay, we'll say LEED Platinum building, it's just since we want to go straight for the sky, although we know that there are probably not very many LEED Platinum buildings in the United States of America. You got gold and silver and a lot of bronze, but not platinum. But I say all that, that the presentation started generating me to think along those lines with regard to the parks. Couple of my council members are dead on when it talks about stakeholders meetings. We definitely got to have that. And we have to do what I always say is my focus. And my focus is dealing with people at opposite ends of the spectrum of life. So I heard seniors, but I always say youth, seniors, and then my emphasis is on everybody who's in between. But definitely look along those lines. And then the uniqueness. I like to see something that's unique to Bowie. And so you ask yourself, well, what is unique to Bowie? When you start looking up here, you see a couple things right there. In the 1970, what's that? Rail, okay? And then you see in the 1914, what's that? Horsing. These are things that are unique to the city of Bowie. So if we could maybe incorporate those those old ideas, basic traditions that we've had in the city of Bowie, I think we got a good project going. But we definitely need to make sure that we do include the stakeholders. And I like Councilman Gardner's idea, his suggestion, although I don't know how much of it could be done at Church Road Park, and I'm not sure if
Church Road Park.
well, I don't know how much. I mean, because there's limited space there. I'm being realistic, I'm being realistic, and I don't know how much could be done in the Huntington area over in Old Town, because I don't know if we have a park structure over there to can handle that type. But I do like the thought. That's my comments.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Just a couple of quick wrap-up thoughts. I like the idea of thinking as broadly as we can about the amphitheater and whatever. The question that comes to my mind, though, is a very simple one. Are we looking at a park that contains a performance center, or are we looking at a performance center that is surrounded by a park? Because the way you answer that question is going to be, is it going to be something that brought us this way, a nice grassy area where families and friends can sit there and interact with each other in a communal, fun way, or is it going to be kind of more regimented with concrete seats? Are we going to replace the grass with concrete? Are we going to put a lot of concrete in where the parking lots are? I think those things have to be thought out very carefully. And quite frankly, my initial reaction to the initial design of the amphitheater leaves me a little cool. One of them looked to me like a top of a intergalactic spaceship or something. Yeah. Maybe that's a millennial thing, but and then the question I would have when just looking at it, one of the challenges with the existing amphitheater is that there are not a lot of facilities there for the performers, to dress or change or whatever. And the way it looked like it was set out, it didn't seem to think that was addressed in there. Now, you may have looked at that and disregarded it, or it may be just a design thing. But I think that has to be looked at as well, because one of the challenges, the more entertaining groups and the diversity of groups require different things in terms of prep and musicians and the way they lay out their instruments and all that other stuff. So I just want to think through all of that before we start doing it. But like I say, my fundamental concern is, what is it going to be? I mean, we're going to go to the park because it's a park. Are we going to go to a performing center that has a park attached to it? Because I think that question is going to fundamentally direct what direction we're going. Now, the other things in there I think are great. I like the creative activities, and we can build on it. Some folk here may have forgotten, but the park down there for the disabled. This was the first in the nation, and it had subtle little additions in it. Sliding boards were large enough to accommodate a child and a parent. If the child were disabled or the parent were disabled, so that they could do things together. And I think that was, a cutting edge thing back then. So I think if you take that same approach and not be inhibited by what was, and say, what's the best thing that's going to be here for the next 20, 30, 40 years? Like I say, right now, the one thought I'm struck with is, what is the amphitheater going to look like, and what is the first thing I'm going to see when I pull into Allen Pond Park? Am I going to see concrete and stairs and seats, or am I going to see a park that invites me to participate with that? So I think that's one of the questions we have to answer. But other than that, like I say, I like the approach. I like the thoughtfulness that I'm a little scared by the numbers. It's a great city, and it's worth it.
Do you mind if I respond for?
Absolutely.
Right. So a couple
As long as you're
things
more
with the
brief than I.
amphitheater. You know, that's one of the challenges staff has kind of talked about with the amphitheater. If you go back and look at the master plan, you know, it incorporated restrooms, concessions, or not concession facility, restrooms and changing areas. And if you recall, back in the days when we had some of the other committees that would help with those events, you know, the amphitheater that's proposed in the master plan was estimated to be like $2.2 million after construction. You know, and staff began thinking about that, saying, well, let's look at how often it's used. If we use it for an international festival and use it for Bowie Fest and we use it for 12 concerts a year, do we need restrooms? Do we need storage rooms? Do we need those elements? Or might we be able to figure out how to incorporate those elements which the military bands need and such not, maybe in the restroom facility that's adjacent to it, so you're not putting a whole lot of brick and mortar into the amphitheater itself, but that those amenities that you're talking about are actually captured somewhere else in the park that still keep that park feel, but also try to keep that cost a lot lower. So that's one of the things that staff will discuss internally, is sort of the needs and where we think we might want to try to go with the city as far as special events go, and of course come back to you for guidance and direction. But having that knowledge up front and that understanding from yourself, Mayor, gives us some guidance when we work with these architects and engineers.
All those are credible considerations and reflect the thoughtfulness that we'd expect from you guys. Thank you very much for, Mr. Wolford.
Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. One last thing, natural acoustics, if some thought can be given into that as well, so that you can mitigate some of the need for some of the equipment for some of the smaller performances. I apologize. Thank you.
Sure.
So you're going to reschedule something, you know, for 4 or 6 weeks from now?
Yeah, we've heard
come in with some, maybe take some of the stuff you've heard here tonight and distill it into something that...
Yeah, exactly, Mayor, and I think we achieved our common goal here tonight, was to initiate the conversation, get some good feedback, and so, you know, we'll sit down with staff and sort out what we've heard tonight and see what we feel the next steps are, and we'll come back to council, and we'll certainly include the other committees and other folks in the process. So appreciate your reaction to all of this and engaging with us, because there's a lot here, and it's very important, not just the dollars, but you know, the future use of these public spaces is what we're talking about. So thank you for your participation.
Well, the bottom line is what you do here and what your organization does, and you know what the staff does is really defines the soul of the city. So you have a heck of a burden and a heck of a responsibility, because if you don't do it right, we'll just shoot you all. With that, Dr. Trout.